Hi, welcome to Reach Daily. I'm Ellie, I'm from Reach Derby. I'm going to be sharing today a bit about what God has been speaking to me through reading the Gospel of Mark, especially chapter 6, verses 30 to 43. But before we get going with that, why don't you take some time to worship, pause this video, and then there'll be a link either above or below the video, which will take you to the worship song for today. So let's start with that reading from Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. So they went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw the great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." Well, when they'd found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and of 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves. And he gave them to his disciples to set before the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. It's an amazing story, and it's a story that you may have heard 100 or perhaps even 1,000 times. It's a story that many of us have known from our childhood, and the awesomeness of it is something which has captured imaginations of children and adults alike for centuries. And honestly, had you asked me 6 months ago, I might have wondered whether God could speak to me of anything new from these verses, which I've read and heard so many sermons on, and yet, obviously, the truth is that God goes on speaking through His words, and actually, it's possible to understand something better as time goes on, and for God to then speak to you about the things that He is saying to you through it. So there is loads that I could talk about this story, this miracle. But we don't have 20 minutes for me to keep going on. So I'm just going to hone in on this line, 42, and all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. I think when I read this again recently, the Holy Spirit really hovered over that line for me. But that's how it works in God's kingdom, that there is enough for everyone to be satisfied. I think it really caught my attention, particularly because I've also been reading the book of Ruth. And there's the wonderful story where Boaz, Ruth's kinsman redeemer, asks Ruth, who is a refugee and an alien in the land and gathering just what is owed to her under the law, the gleaning, the edges of the harvest. And he invites her to come and sit at the table, and he gives her the best, not just the edges that she was entitled to, not just the provision that was hers under the law, but actually he gives her an abundance, and she eats until she is satisfied, and then there are leftovers. And the wording is almost exactly the same as you find here in the book of Mark. And what that tells me is that this is a kingdom thing. And one of the things that was really significant to me is that the people that ate weren't the rich people as you see just before this in the story of Herod inviting the best, the great and the good to his banquet. And they aren't just the poor people, they really are the people who chose to show up. We don't really know anything else about them except that they were people who chose to make a journey into a place of wilderness in order to meet with Jesus and to hear his teaching. To be honest, I don't think I understand that completely yet. But I know that in my heart, sometimes when I come to God in prayer, I ask for a small thing. I ask for what I think perhaps I might be due, like Ruth as the alien and the foreigner in the land who was allowed to go and glean around the edges of the field in order to be provided for, rather than coming to God and asking for the abundance of his kingdom. I sometimes pray as if God has a budget, and I suppose when you're somebody who has often written a budget in order to make what you have go around, and you're continually thinking, well, if I spend that here or if I give that here, then I don't have it to give or to spend over here. And there's a bit of that thinking that creeps into our understanding of how God's kingdom works, as if there's a budget. So I'll come to God in prayer and I'll be asking him for something, but somehow at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, but actually that person needs so much more. Their need is so much greater than mine is. Now, I think what God would actually say to me in that moment is actually, there is enough for me to provide for you all. There's enough for me to provide for everyone who comes. So today, when you come to him and ask for the things that you need for yourself and for others, don't be afraid to pray the big prayers. Don't be afraid to come to God and to expect him to answer in abundance. And don't count yourself out, because there is more than enough, and there is more than enough for everyone who comes and everyone who asks. I'm going to pray. Father God, thank you that you are a God of inclusion and a God of abundance. Lord, I pray that you will give us boldness as we come to you in prayer. In your precious name, amen.